CXO Talk. And wow, every now and then technology fails us. I'm Michael Krigsman, and we're talking with Anne Duane, who is a serial entrepreneur, an amazing woman. And Anne, briefly tell us about your background.
Sure. So I started my career in market research, which was, in retrospect, a great place to start because when you really understand the customer, you really have something to say. And then I moved into brand management at Nabisco for Planters Peanuts, which was just an amazing experience. And I have been to nut school and learned all about that. And then actually did some fun stuff at Nabisco in the very early days of the internet. And that was really my first experience with applying technology to make things better, faster, and cheaper. Then went to business school, came out, and my friend from business school had an epiphany about community that should be connected with technology. And that was Christopher Michael, who's been on this program. And his idea was military.com. And that was really a way to connect people who have served or are serving now to all the benefits of service. And that was a fun opportunity to put technology to work, not just to make things better, faster, and cheaper, but to really connect people to opportunities to learn and succeed, which is really a great purpose-driven organization. And that kind of inspired me for the rest of my career. Um, military.com almost went out of business, and that was a kind of an interesting experience, but we with a great team brought it back from the brink and ended up having that company acquired by Monster, the jobs company, and grew some businesses there, and then decided to go back early stage and join young founders who had a great idea to kind of revolutionize the college admissions process and make it a lot more friendly. And that was a company called Zinch. And we grew that company and then had the chance to work with a bigger company called Chegg. And Chegg is a funny name, but it comes from the solution to a chicken and egg problem. And the chicken and egg problem that Chegg was out to solve is how do you afford college without a great job, and how do you get a great job without college, and so how do you put those things together? Um, and we were acquired by Chegg, grew that business with a great team, went public through that process, really transformed to a much more digital business from a heavily textbook rental organization. And just in the past couple months, I've decided to do the next chapter, which is moving from being an entrepreneur to being an investor. So I'm now a venture investor.
Okay, so the common thread throughout all of this is the notion of community. When you were at Monster, you said you were head of affinity communities or affinity
Yeah,
groups.
that's right.
Another way of saying communities. So the connection. What is the connection between learning, technology, and communities? What has that thread been for you, and what are you now investing in relation to this as well?
Yep. Well, so I think there's a lot of things happening. So, in one sense, with technology like fast networks and globalization and automation and artificial intelligence, um, really knowing is obsolete. It's all about learning. Constant change is here to stay. And technology is doing for our minds what machines did for our muscles. So it's never been more essential to be learning. And at the same time, technology is really making new things possible. And it's more possible than ever for learning to be accessible, whether it's affordable, personal, measurable, right? And effective, right? Because if you want to improve something, measure it. So that's, technology I think can just make things fundamentally better, more convenient, more effective, at a fraction of the cost. And I think that community elements, and sometimes instead of community, I'd say affinity, is important because affinity is about a couple things. One is it's not about being labeled by other people. Affinity is how you self identify. And sometimes when we talk about affinity, we say, well, people show their affinity by what bumper stickers they put on their car. So it's a cause, it's their children's school, it's a college, it's the US Marine Corps, whatever it is. And I think that's increasingly important that people choose to self identify. And then also, affinity is about shared purpose and interest, which is a big motivator. And finally, I think affinity is about relationships, not transactions. And all of those themes, I think, are important. And the other thing is that there's nothing in the world like a great teacher, right? A teacher can inspire and ignite kind of passion for learning. Tricky part is great teachers are not always available to us. And community can fill a bit of a gap in some ways of discovering what's possible for you and then also giving you a pathway to go and do it and the ability to ask questions. So I think that's the intersection, and it's a pretty exciting time. There's about $5 trillion spent around the world on education and training today, from K-12 education through higher education and lifelong learning and workforce training. And in the context of all that new technology, there really are a lot of opportunities for disruption and to make the skills that we're building for or helping people build just much more relevant and at a fraction of the price.
So when you talk about knowledge versus learning, what exactly do you mean?
Yep. So I think that you can know something, and that can help you be effective. And that is absolutely important. But what's happening today is that knowledge often gets dated very quickly. And then the other thing is, just because you know something doesn't mean you necessarily know how to apply it in a new situation. So, and I think a couple examples would be, say, technology coding examples, right? You constantly need to do that. But even things in communication, right? Social media didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago. And if you're not using social media, you may not be making the most of the opportunities available to you, and you may not be as relevant in the labor market.
What about MOOCs and Coursera and edX? Where do they fit into this universe and this notion of community and affinity groups?
Yeah. So I think the exciting thing is that there are so many more choices for people around the world about how they learn. And it can be based on how they like to learn, what they're trying to learn, et cetera. The beauty of MOOCs really is the massively open online courses is that fabulous teachers can be available and accessible to all. And Coursera has a really fascinating model among many other things. But fundamentally, the learning is generally free. And the credential, if you choose to get it, that validates that you took the course and have the competence, is what you pay for. And that is a game changer for humanity in the sense that it levels the playing field and gives people everywhere that access to learning.
We have a question from Twitter. Arsalan Khan asks, can you provide examples of skills that have become obsolete, and what are we being taught that is relevant?
Okay, great. Good question. Okay, so I would say that some manufacturing skills are are being changed by automation. Right. And I think that the idea that you would go into one company and stay there for your entire career and really not have to do a lot of training and workforce development over time is just not right anymore. The model has to be one of perpetually changing and learning. Things like creative or critical thinking are very applicable today. Communication skills, the ability to articulate a point of view and communicate that is really important. Another one is collaboration. And increasingly, especially in the workforce, it's a team sport, right? It's synchronized swimming. Even when people are independent contractors, right, they're fitting into a larger human system. And some of those skills are really important, and they call them sometimes 21st century skills. So I think at the core, there's lots of skills that are enduring, right? And in fact, sometimes the liberal arts gets a bad reputation because they say, oh, it's all about coding. But I don't agree, because if you actually think about the liberal arts as they were constructed, critical thinking, rhetoric, right, which is communication, those core fundamentals are good. But all of us are challenged now to keep up with relevant ways of applying them to new situations. Good question.
Yeah, so I'm particularly interested in military.com for two reasons. Number one, what did you learn as you were, once you sold it to monster.com and now you're in charge of affinity groups, what exactly does that mean and what did you learn? And then separately, from the startup perspective, military.com went through a very dark period. And
Yes,
you've written about this, so this is not, I'm not airing some secret dirty laundry here. And I'd like to know what you did to fix it.
Okay, good. Well, maybe we'll take that one first because it's a kind of a fun adventure story. And, it's actually really relevant now because it was in 2001 when the economy really changed. And the dot-com boom of the 99, 2000 era abruptly stopped. And there wasn't funding, follow-on funding for startups. And just overall, the economy constricted. And we had clients who weren't paying us. We had clients who didn't want to continue doing business with us. We had primarily an ad-supported model, and it was ugly. And I think that we were optimizing for some metrics like unique visitors and certain things that didn't actually correlate to profitability or being cash flow break even. And in retrospect, if you want to build a great business, you have to be focused on the fundamentals and at least have in your control the ability to turn the dials at any time so that you're not reliant on external capital. So we had to learn a very tough lesson. So we had to, reduce our workforce, which is very painful to do. We had a great team, and it wasn't a reflection on them. It was a reflection on the fact that we needed to retrench. And then we needed to go and sell our socks off and make sure that there was revenue coming in. And that's always a tricky thing because literally we would go out to sales calls, and the advertisers were folks like AT&T or USAA or car companies and things like that. And you really couldn't let on that if they didn't sign, that we couldn't make payroll. And I think that you have to kind of dig deep inside yourself. And the confidence to do those meetings comes from not hubris or anything like that. It comes from kind of the conviction that this was a good idea and it should exist in the world. And it was providing a valuable service, both to the service members and veterans that we served and real ROI for the advertiser. So I think that's the secret. And we had to be really disciplined in our approach. And that is really an important lesson for an entrepreneur is there's a lot of things that are nice to do, but you got to figure out what's essential and what's the right sequence.
So you made a very interesting point. You said you were focused on metrics such as number of visitors.
Yep.
So what were then, so how did you, so you're in this situation, what were the metrics that you shifted to, and how were you then, when you went off on this selling effort, how were you able to convince sponsors or advertisers, and what was your model? How did you convince them to sign up, whereas before then you obviously hadn't?
Yeah. So I think that the big deal is in today's world, it's not about awareness. It's much more about engagement. And I think that we were able to focus on who is coming and using our resources, online resources, to actually inform purchase decisions, right? About which car to buy or how to, which insurance might be a good fit for their family or something like that. So I think it was really returning to the fundamentals and then really thinking less about just a media company where you aggregate a bunch of eyeballs and then you have some random ads, and more like a marketplace where you have people really trying to actively research things and then service providers trying to compete for their business.
So that was a thing that enabled you to get people to sign up.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It was a good place. It was a place that provided, really, we used to say the inside scoop, or in the Navy they call it the gouge, and and to in order to discover opportunities and products and services that might be a good fit.
And so you mentioned that awareness is not sufficient, but you need engagement. What do you mean by that?
Well, we wanted a depth of a relationship with the people coming to use our services. So, are they coming? Are they staying for a long time? Are they coming back? Are they actually transacting through us?
So these days in customer service and customer relationship management, engagement is the hot topic, although engagement is almost being superseded by the notion of experience. Does that come
Yeah.
into play?
Yeah, no, I think it does. And then I think one lesson we learned at military.com for sure was there's a difference between what I'll call client service and client success. And client service is like, we'll answer your phone in a timely manner, your phone call in a timely manner, we'll be responsive to you, we'll kind of live up to the letter of the law of what we're going to provide to you. But client success is different. Client success is where the team really takes ownership for the success metrics of the client, right? And really becomes an extension of that team and delivers for that team. And if you can, as an organization, do that, that's a huge sea change, right? And that creates interdependence or real dependence on you, which is something we were able to do over time.
And what are the levers that drive engagement? So at military.com, for example, just to be specific, concrete, what were some of the levers that you figured out would drive engagement and not just eyeballs?
Yeah. So we were operating in, it started in 2000, and the term social network really didn't exist at the time. But we did know that when people were connected with other people on the site, their engagement went up. So again, I think that rather than being a media company, we were a place to connect with other people. And so we kind of got out of the way and became the place you connected with individuals, with services, with jobs, with all of that kind of stuff. So I think that's the trust that came from providing a really good service.
Okay, so you brought military.com back from the brink, and then you sold it to monster.com. And now, and at monster.com, you were responsible for quote unquote affinity groups.
Yep.
Or affinity groups? Was that the name?
Yeah, yeah, right. Networks, I think, yes.
Affinity networks. Okay. So how did that build on what you had done in this, as you were just describing, in this period of time where suddenly you were very successful?
Yeah. Well, so I think we learned a lot of ways to engage a community. And what Monster had realized, and they had really created this online job matching category, but it was very transactional. People would come to Monster when they were looking for a job. And the reality is that many employers are looking for people who aren't actively looking for a job. So as you walk around the planet, there aren't many unemployed nurses that are sitting around, looking for a job. There aren't many unemployed engineers or other sought after professions. So how would Monster engage a community over time, have a relationship? And maybe that's professional development or other ways that help them stay engaged. So Monster would have the opportunity to present new career opportunities to those, what we called passive seekers, right? People who are gainfully employed but might want to consider their next move. And that Affinity Networks was really about taking those learnings from the military community and trying to apply them to other communities. And Christopher Michael was really, a thought leader in this, and actually went out after selling military.com to Monster and started a company really focused on engaging those communities. And sure enough, very quickly, I think within a year or two after starting it, Monster acquired it because it was such a unique capability.
That's right, Affinity Labs, which
That's right.
I never made the connection. So in today's world, many startups are focused. You know, we hear about things like content marketing
Yep.
and influencer marketing and all of this, and at its heart, it is very, very closely tied to what you're talking about.
Yep.
So that raises the question then, how can a startup founder or somebody working inside a large company who's in marketing, for example, how do you build that community? How do you establish that affinity? What do you do?
Yeah. So I think it's about a couple of things. So one is just really hitting the nail on the head, right? In terms of the questions that people have in their mind. And one way to do it is to make sure that if people ask a question, that you have quality answers. And that might be really supporting an answering community, right? Or maybe it's technology that gets you the right answer to a question in the case of search engines or something like that. Um, but um, and then I think it's using increasingly what you know about people, what they have volunteered to you, in order to serve up the right stuff at the right time. And that's where I think the technology has just continued to evolve, right? Because I think we used to be in an era where technology was a tool. Okay, you can go and you can look this stuff up. But where we want technology to evolve is technology to serve us, right? And to be, again, with our permission about our willingness to share our preferences and interests and behaviors and whatever, so that the technology can be prompting us. Oh, do you want to? Looks like you need this. Looks like here's, don't forget to do this, or help you discover a product or service or person, right, that could be helpful to you at that time. And I think that's really exciting, and that's where we're headed. And, we talked about artificial intelligence a little bit earlier, and, there's a lot of people in the world that are very negative on the labor displacement that could happen with some of these things. And that is non trivial. We have to think that through. There will certainly be people whose careers are impacted by technology. But I also think on the flip side, there are tremendous new possibilities created by technology, and technology that becomes easier to use and effectively lets people on ramp to a networked economy where they can actually have more access to opportunity and prosperity, which is pretty exciting.
You know, on some level, what you were describing, the technology, the system, giving people the answers that they want at the time that they want it, and so forth. It sounds like you're like an ad technology dream come true. And I know that's not your intention, but you've just described personalization and ads.
Yeah. Well, I guess ads it's funny because I read a study a long time ago that says people don't mind advertising that's really relevant to them, right? If advertising is really discovery of products and services and information, that's good. That is true. I think it has broader than commercial applications. Right? If you find information that helps you be healthier and actually contributes to your happiness or longevity, that doesn't have a clear economic benefit, but it creates value for you. And I think so many companies today have the opportunity to create a lot more value than they capture. By again, and that's the beauty of technology. It kind of lets you cheat the laws of the universe, which is, it used to be better, faster, cheaper. Pick any two, right? But now, there really are cases where technology lets us be better, faster, and cheaper. And that's especially true in the case of discovering opportunities. And there's a great quote out there that says, "Talent is widely distributed, but opportunity is not." And the network lets people really engage with what's out there and see what's possible for them, get the learning, for example, that they need to close the skill gap, and then to participate in that economy. And again, it's not perfect by any means, but it is, frankly, I think better than it's ever been.
Now, apply it to education.
Yeah. Um, well, I think that uh, um, there just is an opportunity now to think about um, how personalizing opportunities and making learning fun. And those two dimensions are really new. So much of education and training around the world is highly standardized, right? There's standardized tests and there's all that kind of stuff. But now with technology, I think we have opportunities for personalized and adaptive learning. That's huge. Um, and I think the whole notion of fun is also big. And this has less to do with technology than just a kind of a change in mindset. And somewhere along the way, and maybe it was the Prussian influence in education or something like that, it's kind of like we decided that learning was too important to be fun. And schools became a fun vacuum. And the training we have to do as part of corporate America isn't generally very fun. But the reality is, learning happens best when people are having fun. And in fact, in gaming, computer gaming, learning is the fun. I mean, think about the time people spend on games. And again, whether they're offline games or online games, athletics or whatever, think about the time and effort people put into practicing and mastery. And could we create those same kind of healthy addictions in other areas? And I think that we're going to be seeing more of that kind of engagement. And so it's going to be learning that's a lot more effective and a lot more fun, literally fun.
So, learning and personalization. What about applying this to the corporate market? Because now
Yep.
you've been talking so far about higher ed or secondary
Yeah, the
schooling.
whole thing. Yep. Yep.
So
We
so
should. Yep. No, I will, and I think that the thought that we would go to school from the time we're about 5 years old to 18 or 22 or something, um, and then we kind of fill the knowledge tank and we'd be done for the rest of our lives is just a fallacy, right? We are need to continuously be learning, and so I think we're seeing a lot of innovation, and certainly as venture capitalists, we're looking at some of those companies, whether it's companies. Like Degreed or Pluralsight or some of these others that are really emerging to help people build their skills is really important. And especially as the more of the world moves to be freelancers or flexible workers, right? It's incumbent upon each of us to build our own skills. And think of ourselves as athletes, right? That are trying, to increasingly be able to have the, kind of lifestyle we desire to have by investing in ourselves.
and is that your focus right now? Is this what you're seeking out as you
Yep.
transition from being a public company executive and an entrepreneur to investor?
Yep. So we're really thinking about backing entrepreneurs who have an epiphany about learning and talent development. And the companies that we think about we are technology enabled, but they're human centered, right? They're not just machine learning. They might involve machine learning, but they would involve a leveraging a person and helping that person be more effective. And so that's one aspect. We look, of course, for big market, but it really comes back to the entrepreneur. And we say that entrepreneurs have these epiphanies, and I always think sometimes entrepreneurs are like comedians. Comedians don't live in a different world than we do. They just have a different lens on the world that lets them see the humor in it. And entrepreneurs are the same way. I mean, so many times um, we are struck by what the entrepreneur has looked at a situation that so many of us have seen as uh, intractable, or we just take it for granted, and they identify um, a simple idea that changes our mind. And that epiphany is important because if that entrepreneur is able to explain that in a way that inspires others, they have the kernel of the ability to really be a catalyst. And then hopefully they're really convicted about that. Like they're really, as we might say, hell bent on this because that resilience is needed as an entrepreneur. So yeah, so we're looking for entrepreneurs that think about learning and technology and that really feel there's a better way leveraging technology.
So we have a comment from Steve DiFilippo, who is a higher education CIO, who
Okay.
says he loves the statement technology enabled but human centered. So maybe elaborate on that.
Yep.
What does that mean?
Yeah. So I think, and I think it's the folks at MIT, like Andrew McAfee, that says that technology today is doing for our minds what machines did for our muscles. There were people displaced by, the automation of machines, right? But by and large, machines enabled us to do things much faster. And in fact, I was on a little trip in Vietnam, and I was biking through the back roads of Vietnam, and one of the local guides said, well, we have oxen that help us plow the fields. And we also have Japanese oxen. And I said, oh, what's that? And he said, yeah, it's a tractor because it's a Toyota thing. And he said, I can't tell you the difference it makes in people's lives, right? And in the space of 20 years, right, Vietnam has gone from not being able to feed itself to being the number 3 exporter of rice in the world. And it's just hard to argue that that technology did not augment humanity. Now, there might be some spillover effects of technology, and nothing is perfect, but I think that there is this ability, and people who are worried about technology, I think, need to be thoughtful about, let's have the conversation about how we can make sure that we get the kind of future we want with technology. It's not, the future isn't written, right? And we have that opportunity.
Now, what are as you are out talking with companies, can you give any examples of companies who are doing interesting things, such as what you're describing?
Sure. Let's see. So there's so many. I'm trying to think. So one I'll point to is one is Andela, and Andela is founded by Jeremy Johnson, and he's a very successful serial entrepreneur, and he has education boot camps or training in Africa, and the people there are able to get certifications, and then he offers their services to American companies, right? So there's kind of a globalization going on there, which is interesting. I think that there's great companies like Clever. So Clever has a marketplace for decision makers in K-12 school districts to purchase things efficiently and to purchase them in an environment where they get to understand what are other school districts seeing. And so that just allows a level of transparency and efficiency, which is really exciting. So I think there's tons of this. And actually there's a company called Creative DevWorks in Baltimore that actually has a similar model. They're actually training people who sometimes even haven't graduated from high school with a bunch of skills that let them get employed. And there's so many, I think, potential game changers out there. And it's not that there's one size fits all. There's more choices. And now there's, I think, more transparency to what's actually working.
What about the business models? Because all of this ultimately can't just be effective from an educational standpoint. In order to be funded and to get out there in the market, there has to be a sound business model. So do you have any thought on the business model around all of this stuff?
Well, I think there's multiple business models, and this is one example. This entire category has a lot of money in it. So again, globally, the market is $5 trillion. spent on education and training, and that's the different breakout from K-12, higher ed, and beyond. The easiest models are ones that say the alternative is to purchase this at X dollars, and we offer the same benefit or more, right, with more convenience at a fraction of the price. So, and I'll use Chegg as a quick example. So Chegg offered textbook rental and now digital textbooks and a bunch of other stuff. But buying textbooks new is really expensive for college students. The ability to rent textbooks that you don't want to keep, right, saves up to 90%. That's a huge savings. Another thing that Chegg has is called Chegg Tutors. And Chegg Tutors lets you as a student, whether you're in high school or college or wherever, if you wanted, or in theory in the workforce, right, if you needed help, you could go online and via voice, video, or text, connect with an expert, and you get to pick, the expert that you like, right, that you have affinity for. Maybe it's another woman who went to your college or went to your high school or something like that. And you pay as little as 50 cents a minute. And so think about that change. There's a lot of studies out there that say that one-on-one tutoring provides outsized results to students, right, in terms of learning outcomes. Well, one-on-one tutoring was extremely expensive and inconvenient, right? And you were kind of signing up for, at the minimum, like going somewhere, whether it was a tutoring center on campus or, the tutor comes to your house or whatever, for an hour. The paradigm now is literally you could be on your mobile phone or your computer. You could be stuck on a calculus problem, and you could get 5 minutes of help to get yourself unstuck. So you can schedule recurring sessions with someone to take you through stuff, or you can get the help you need just in time. So these are game changers. And it wasn't until a couple years ago where the technology would have been available to make that effective.
So these are examples, what you were just describing, of using the technology to power human-centered education.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So what's next for you?
Well, I'm, feel privileged to be having the opportunity to talk to new entrepreneurs that want to start their businesses. And, I think that I've made a lot of mistakes and learned a lot of lessons over the many years of doing this. And just am excited to work with them more. And, I do think that we have a great opportunity, again, to put technology to work for us, to make sure that we create more opportunity and more prosperity for people everywhere.
Fantastic. Well, we have been talking with Ann Dwane, who is a serial entrepreneur, and this has been episode number 157 of
Wow.
CXO Talk. Ann, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks, Michael.
And everybody, I am so grateful that you are taking the time to watch us today, and come back next week and we will have another awesome show. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.